Imagine two people sitting in the same break room, earning the exact same salary, working the exact same hours, living in apartments that cost nearly the same amount per month, and yet 10 years from now, one of them will have quietly built something that the other cannot even see yet. Not because of luck, not because of inheritance, and not because one of them worked harder than the other, but because somewhere along the way, one of them began to think about money differently, and that shift in thinking changed every decision that followed. Financial intelligence is not a single skill you either have or you don't. It is a spectrum, a series of levels that every person moves through or gets stuck inside, depending not on their income, but on the frameworks they use to interpret what money actually is and what it is supposed to do. Most people never receive a map of these levels. They are handed a paycheck, pointed toward a bank account, and left to figure out the rest through trial and error across decades of their lives. The first level is what we might call survival thinking. At this stage, money is experienced almost entirely as a source of anxiety. It arrives and it disappears, and the primary financial goal is simply to make it to the next paycheck without a crisis. People at this level are not irresponsible. They are overwhelmed by a system that was never explained to them. Every dollar feels urgent because every dollar is urgent. There is no margin, no buffer, and therefore no space to think beyond the immediate. The psychological weight of this level is significant because when the brain is operating under financial stress, research consistently shows that cognitive bandwidth narrows. The mind focuses on the short term, not out of weakness, but out of necessity, and that narrowing makes it very difficult to see the longer arc. The second level is stability thinking, and it begins the moment a small buffer appears. It might be a few $100s in a savings account or a month's worth of expenses set aside, but the psychological effect is disproportionate to the amount. Studies in behavioral economics have shown that even modest emergency savings dramatically reduce stress-related financial decisions. At this level, people begin to stop reacting and start planning, even if only slightly. The fog lifts just enough to see the next few months rather than just the next few days.
The third level is optimization thinking. This is where most financially literate people spend a great deal of their energy, budgeting carefully, eliminating debt systematically, comparing interest rates, and learning to distinguish between spending that builds value and spending that simply feels comfortable. This level produces real results, and it is genuinely important, but it also contains a subtle trap. Optimization thinking is still fundamentally defensive. It is about protecting and preserving what exists, rather than constructing something new. And people who remain here indefinitely often find that careful budgeting alone, without any understanding of how assets work, produces a kind of financial ceiling they cannot identify, but consistently bump against. The fourth level is where the real transition happens: asset thinking. This is the point at which a person begins to understand that money is not just a medium for buying things, but a resource that can be deployed to generate more resources. The core insight at this level is the difference between an asset and an expense, a distinction that sounds simple but restructures everything once it is genuinely internalized. People at this level begin asking a different set of questions. Instead of asking how much something costs, they begin asking what something produces. Instead of managing cash flow month to month, they begin designing systems where money moves on its own toward outcomes they have already defined. The fifth level, what we might call systems thinking, is where financial intelligence begins to resemble architecture more than accounting. At this level, the individual is no longer primarily focused on their own income as the engine of their financial life. They understand leverage, they understand how compounding works, not just in theory, but in real portfolio behavior over real time, and they understand that the most important financial decisions are structural rather than tactical. This is the level at which people begin building things that will outlast their active participation: businesses, portfolios, income structures that do not require their daily attention to continue functioning. What separates each of these levels is not primarily knowledge. The information required to move from one level to the next is widely available and has been for decades. What separates them is perception, specifically how a person perceives their relationship to money at a given moment in time, and whether that perception is fixed or open to revision. Every level contains a set of invisible assumptions about what is possible, what is appropriate, and what money is fundamentally for, and those assumptions act as a ceiling until they are examined and replaced.
The person who retires with a portfolio did not simply save more aggressively than their colleague in the break room. They moved through a sequence of mental models, each one more expansive than the last, and they did so not because they were smarter, but because at some point they became curious about the level above the one they were in. That curiosity is the only prerequisite that actually matters. The paycheck is where almost everyone begins. The portfolio is simply what happens when the thinking keeps evolving.